I keep the deep stacks under the Cradle vault, and I want to tell you first that we never built a weapon for this. We built a reading room. My name is Joran Cade. My family has held this post for 11 generations, which sounds like a long time until you understand it is not even a tenth of what we were waiting for. 9,000 years ago, an authority we only ever knew by its old designation, the Continuum, ran a program on this planet that it later tried to erase. It called Earth a test range. It called what it made here a controlled asset. Then the Continuum collapsed somewhere out past the dark we can still see, and it left the asset running, and it sealed the file, and it went away. We found the seal first. The asset came later. The vault itself is older than any of us, a shaft driven straight down through bedrock by engineers who had no idea what they were protecting when they built it. Only that the Continuum's departure had left behind something too dangerous to leave unread, and too dangerous to destroy. My grandmother used to say, the deep stacks were less an archive than a wound we had agreed, as a species, never to let close over without first understanding what caused it. Every archivist who has ever worked down here has felt the weight of that agreement in the small hours, hunched over a fragment of corrupted code, wondering if the answer they were chasing even still existed anywhere in the ruin the Continuum left behind. I was in the lower gallery, cataloging a fracture in an old storage core, when the shaft alarm woke the whole complex at once. Not a siren, we don't use those anymore, just a change in the pitch of the air moving through the vents, a pressure drop that every archivist learns to feel in their teeth before they understand it with their ears. I climbed the spiral stair to the high shaft, the one place in the vault where you can see the sky, and I watched them come down through it. They didn't look like conquerors. That was the first wrong thing about them. Conquerors plan for resistance. These came in low and fast and disorganized, spreading out across the ridge above us in a pattern I recognized before I wanted to. A harvesting spread, the kind you use on ground you expect to be empty. 6 of them, then a dozen, armored in something that had grown rather than been forged, joints sheathed in overlapping plates the color of old bone. Their weapons hung loose in clawed hands, not raised. They were not hunting anything, they were collecting. Above them, the assembly skyline did what it always does. It simply continued to exist. Towers that would have looked like myths to whatever built the Continuum. A defense platform crossing high and slow against the morning cloud, its underside catching the light. Nobody scrambled a response. Nobody needed to. That is the thing about being ready for 9,000 years. By the time it happens, readiness doesn't feel like an event, it feels like weather. The pack leader stopped on the ridge and looked up at all of it, and I watched something in its posture come apart. Not fear exactly, recalculation. It had descended onto what its own directive told it was unclaimed, unmonitored ground, and instead, it had landed in the shadow of a civilization that should not have been able to grow here at all. Not after what the Continuum did to this place. Not according to any file the pack had ever been given. I want to be honest about what happened next, because it would be easy to make it sound braver than it was. We did not go up to meet them with soldiers. My director sent 3 of us, myself, an old translator named Priya Anand, who had spent 40 years learning to read Continuum cant from fragments, and a boy barely out of his novitiate named Tomas, who carried nothing but a data spike and a face too calm for someone his age. We walked up the access ramp unarmed, into a ring of raiders who could have ended all 3 of us before we cleared the first step, and the assembly's warships stayed exactly where they were, high and silent, because that was the whole plan. Force was the fallback. It was never the offer. The pack leader turned on us the way a wall turns. All at once, nothing wasted. Up close, its eyes weren't hostile. They were confused in a way that had teeth in it, the confusion of something that has never once in its existence been given a reason to stop. I could see the joints of its armor clearly now, and they weren't armor at all in the way we build it. They were grown structure, seamed with old scarring, the marks of a body that had been used hard and repaired crudely, for longer than any single life should have to run. Whatever the Continuum had made, It had not been kind to it afterward either. Priya spoke first, in the old cant, slow and careful, and I watched the leader's head tilt at the sound of a dead authority's language coming out of a human mouth. She told it what we were, not defenders, not hunters, archivists, keepers of a file the Continuum sealed and left behind when it fled, a file that named exactly what the pack was built to be, and exactly what had been done to make it that way. It didn't believe her. I don't think it had the architecture to believe anything that fast. So Tomas knelt in the dirt of that ridge, ran the data spike into a reader plate we'd carried up for exactly this moment, and put the original record into the air between us. Not a summary, not our version, the Continuum's own untouched files, 9,000 years preserved in a vault, built specifically so that no later regime could soften or bury them again. Names, batch numbers. A directive coded so deep into the pack's biology that it functioned less like an order and more like hunger. The record didn't flatter us either. It showed exactly how little say Earth had once had in any of it, back before the Continuum left, and we were the ones who had to live with what remained. That was the 9,000 years, right there, on a data spike in a boy's hand. Every generation of my family had added to that reading, cross-checked it, verified it against fragments recovered from a dozen dead installations, built not a bomb, but a countercode, the one string of instruction buried in the pack's own architecture that could release it from a directive it had never chosen and could not refuse. We had built the assembly's warships too, because patience is not the same as naivety. But the warships were the door we hoped never to open. The countercode was the door we'd spent 9 millennia trying to find the key to. The pack leader read its own history off that plate in silence, and I watched grief move through something that had no face built for grief. Watched its claws uncurl by degrees, watched the others behind it go still, the way a held breath goes still. When Priya finally asked if it would accept the correction, it didn't answer with words. It knelt, the way you kneel when your legs simply stop obeying an order that has run out of reasons. The deep stacks broadcast the release that afternoon, up through the high shaft, into a sky that had a warship in it, and did not need the warship at all. I felt it more than heard it. A low correction running through the ground, through every one of them on that ridge at once, unmaking a compulsion 9,000 years old in the space of a few seconds. Some of them wept, if that's the word for what a body built like that does with sudden freedom. Some simply stood, disoriented, blinking at a sky they had never once been permitted to look at without a task attached to it. For a long moment after the correction ran through, nobody on that ridge moved at all, and I remember thinking it was the quietest I had ever heard a battlefield that never became one. Priya was crying by then, though she would deny it if you asked her. Tomas just sat back on his heels in the dirt, still holding the reader plate, looking at it like it had gotten heavier. We didn't send them home, because none of them had one left worth the name. We gave them a place on the surface instead, under watch, under patience, the same two things that had kept this vault running since before any of us were born. The pack leader asked me, through Priya, why we hadn't simply destroyed them the moment the platform saw them land. I told it the truth. Because we had spent 9,000 years reading a file, so we would never have to. That's the part I want you to understand, if you take nothing else from this. We were not stronger because we built taller towers or heavier ships, though we did build those, and we kept them ready. We were stronger because somewhere under this ground, an unbroken line of ordinary people spent 9,000 years finishing a sentence the Continuum tried to leave unread. The sky above the vault still fills with warships some mornings, out of habit more than need now. But the record my family kept, the one the Continuum sealed and thought was buried for good, that's the part of us that actually answered.